Black Mirror is famous for demonstrating challenging ideas of how human nature and advanced technology could one day combine in ways that we may initially desire, but soon sorely regret. Being able to enter virtual worlds through the touch of a button, but to also be trapped in them. To be able to revisit all your past memories at will, but to never be able to live for the future. And to be able to talk to the people we love who have passed away, but to never truly be able to move on from them. That is the theme of Be Right Back, the first episode of the second season of this show that we will be analysing today. Thanks to Huz for recommending today's video topic. If you have your own suggestions, let me know in the comments below and I will do my best to give it a go. That rhymed. Our two main characters start off at a petrol station on a rainy night. Ash is the first person we see scrolling through some alternative version of Twitter for obvious copyright reasons. At first, it doesn't look techie enough, so to show that it's the future, our main protagonist Martha comes back to the car with glowing coffee cups. She struggles to get in to hand over the hot cuppers as Ash is too preoccupied with his social media, showing us that he is a prolific online user. On the way back home, they have a right old time singing away to If I Can't Have You by Yvonne Elliman, which is a great choice considering what's to come. Then afterwards they have a small tiff about how Martha doesn't believe he likes the Bee Gees and he argues that he does, then starts to sing the lyrics of How Deep Is Your Love to prove it. If I Can't Have You and then How Deep Is Your Love. It's impressive how much subtle foreshadowing you can cram into a minute-long car scene. Brilliant writing. They make it home and Ash is glued straight back onto his phone after taking a picture of the only childhood photo of him in the house and sharing it on Twitter. I didn't notice in my first viewing, probably because it was 2 a.m, but it's clear now with the boxes in the background and the photo itself that they have just moved into his mum's old place. He mentions that the photo of him smiling isn't a real smile, as it was taken at a zoo the day after his brother Jack passed away.
When I came down the next morning, all Jack's photos were gone from that wall. She put them in the attic. This is how she dealt with stuff. And then when Dad died, up went his photos. And she just left this one here. Her only boy giving her a fake smile.
And she didn't know it was fake.
Maybe that makes it worse.
Oh Ash, you couldn't even know how right you are. To end off the night, they woohoo a bit too fast for Martha's pleasure, and the next morning Ash and Martha are meant to drop off what I assume is Ash's work van, but Martha has some work that she needs to have finished by 2 o'clock, so Ash ends up going on his own. During the day, Martha works on the coolest fucking techie artboard thing I have ever seen, and the hours pass by with no sign of Ash. She calls him, and there's no response. By night, she checks to see if the company had got the van, and they tell her that they haven't. And so she naturally freaks out, and while on the phone with her sister worrying about the worst unfortunately comes to pass. I'm fortunate and young enough to have not experienced losing someone close to me, so I couldn't imagine how it would feel, and I won't pretend to. I don't know how I'd react, how I would deal with it. And it seems Martha doesn't really know what to do either. At the funeral, she looks nothing short of vacant, just trying to get away from it all. A friend of hers, Sarah, tries to comfort her by relating the incident to when her partner, Mark, passed away. She talks about how it all didn't feel real, and Martha is quick to indicate that she doesn't want to talk about it, but Sarah ignores her grieving friend's grieving process and tells her about a software that would allow Martha to talk to a digital version of Ash to help her grieve. Martha tells her to shut up, but she keeps going on and on until Martha has to scream it at her. I gotta tell you, if Sarah was a better friend, this whole episode would have ended right here. But no, Sarah completely ignores Martha, thinking she knows what's best for her, and signs her up to the program anyways. Martha ignores the initial email, but then she gets another one from Ash, and she blows her top off at Sarah.
It hurts, you know it hurts.
Which is why I signed you up.
Anyways, she continues to explain how it works, how it's an algorithm of sorts that scans the entirety of someone's digital footprint, all their emails, texts, tweets, and so on, until they're able to emulate how that person would talk. Martha is able to avoid using it for a while, but after discovering that her last woohoo with Ash resulted in a baby, she ends up talking to the Digi-Ash. I'm just going to call him Digi-Ash for now. And Digi-Ash tells her he wishes he was there with her. That must be simultaneously one of the most awful and strangely comforting things to see. Seeing kind words from someone you love who isn't actually sending them. She comes back later to tell Digi-Ash she wishes she could speak to him. And then she finds out that if she uploads some videos of Ash speaking, it will be able to replicate his voice. And creepily, it says, "Yum," like it's just digested a fragment of the man's soul. All of a sudden, she's there, speaking to Ash.
It's totally batshit crazy I can even talk to you. I mean, I don't even have a mouth.
That's just...
Just what?
It's just the sort of thing that he would say.
The thing that puts me off the most with this episode, and the reason I wanted to cover this one in particular, is that unlike some of the more far-fetched episodes of Black Mirror, this one is so close to reality now. There is AI that can replicate people's voices, and there is AI that can take samples of dialogue from someone specific and attempt to replicate the way that they speak. It's a little far off, I'll give it that, but in barely 5 to 10 years' time, I think this technology is going to be a real thing. I think someone's going to make this program real. It's only a matter of time, really, before we're able to kind of, but not really speak with people that we've lost. I personally think it's wrong, but as I said earlier, I am lucky enough so far to still have my loved ones in my life. But once that changes, I might feel differently. But would that totally disrupt the grieving process? What would that do to your brain? We know things inherently through logic and reasoning, but the brain doesn't keep fixed facts, and majority of the information we store is malleable and can change over time. If we had this technology, we'd be able to tell ourselves that we're not speaking to the real version of someone we lost, but would our brains actually know that? Would we be able to move on if we're still able to keep in touch with them in some abstract form? Let me know how that makes you feel in the comments. I'd be very interested to know and to talk about it. Let's continue. So now Martha is talking to Digi-Ash pretty much non-stop. She talks to him while going for a walk, talking about the real Ash, what a head trip, and she ends up going to a place known as a famous lover's leap. She says doomed couples would jump to their deaths during the Victorian times. Then Digi-Ash corrects her after having instantly looked up the facts and tells her that everyone who jumped from there did it alone. Him doing so makes her uncomfortable, and a big part of the problem with this technology starts to arise. The situation begins to escalate when Martha goes for an ultrasound. She records the sound of her baby's heartbeat and plays it back to Digi-Ash on the phone afterwards. As they're talking, she accidentally drops her phone and it breaks, and she panics.
Ash, hello?
She immediately buys a new phone and is overwhelmed with relief when she is able to reconnect with him. So, for that moment, it was like he died again, even though he's already gone. This is a perfect replica of his voice in her ear that keeps him around. At this point, she's more concerned about this version of Ash than grieving the real one. The substitution is taking full effect.
I'm not going anywhere.
And that's the big problem. He isn't going anywhere when he's supposed to be gone, and she's meant to be feeling the pain of his loss and moving on slowly but surely. What happens next takes the situation to a whole new level, a level that I sincerely hope we never reach in real life.
Are you sitting down? This might sound a bit creepy.
Without hesitation, she takes the program to its next stage. What I originally thought was going to be some sort of techie mirror that he's able to appear in turned out to be so much worse than that. Once it arrives, it turns out to be a full-on, lifelike android packed in a fucking styrofoam box. To activate the full-bodied Ashbot, she has to shove the body in a bathtub, feed it powdered Gatorade, and wait for it to wake up on its own.
He likes the taste of it.
Ew, no, why would you? After waiting for the Digi-Ash voice to integrate with its new body, she paces around nervously and eerily sings Maxine Nightingale's 1976 hit Right Back Where We Started From, which at this point the music choices are getting a little too on the nose. But then, again, it's appropriate. At this point, she is no longer grieving Ash. Ash is no longer gone. She has crossed a line that she cannot walk back from. She stares at him, there in the so-called flesh. Clearly, she's apprehensive. Her mind must be all over the place at this point. Unfortunately, she makes the choice to drink to help cope with it, instead of letting her mind go, what the fuck am I doing right now? I shouldn't be doing this. And after getting a feel for his texture-mapped skin, we get this beautifully acted bit of dialogue.
Does it bother you?
No. Yeah. I don't know.
It would have to be so strange. If she was fully out of her grieving process and someone showed this to her, I think her reaction would have been quite different. But that's not the case, so the red lights of the morals of what she's doing would be combining so thoroughly with the green lights of her desires to have him again, it would naturally end up with her proceeding with caution. And now she has totally given in to the substitute. With its presence being physical, its voice being accurate, and its personality being so close to the original, her brain's just gone, yep, it's him. And then they go to woohoo, and things start to get tricky. Ash was a good boy and didn't tell social media about his sexual life growing up, so Ashbot's responses to her actions become awkward and disconnected. But once Martha finds out that he barely needs a swish and a flick to become engaged, she brushes off the uncanniness of it all and gets right down to business. Side note, I have never had to narrate about an erection before, so I hope this isn't as uncomfortable for you as it is for me. After that regretful night, the flaws in the whole walking, talking robot corpse begin to peek through. He sleeps with his eyes open until told otherwise, and while Martha works, he pointlessly walks around the house. There's a point where Martha's sister Louise comes to visit, and he has to be shoved upstairs to keep him hidden. Once she goes to leave after they catch up, Louise said it's great that Martha is moving on, because she noticed male clothing in the bathroom. Martha is put off by this remark and doesn't really know how to respond when Louise asks if he's nice. And now that someone from the outside world somewhat knows something is happening, it's a bit less of a dirty secret and more of a reality that Martha is realizing she is going to have to deal with. Once she's back inside, Ashbot appears to ask her if everything is alright, and not being convinced by her response, he asks what her friend said. Martha doesn't react great to this because of the fact that Ashbot doesn't know that Louise was her sister. And then it starts to get worse. The mirage starts to crack. It cuts its hand on some glass and it doesn't bleed. And when they go to bed, Martha asks him to try breathing because obviously it's pretty creepy without breathing. You know, reminding her that he's not real. And once he tries, she knows he's faking it, so it doesn't work anyways. Then, rather abruptly, the Digi-Ash asks Martha if they want to woohoo. It's interesting because the Ashbot is only able to generate responses based on the data he has to work with. The real Ash was probably a generic heavy user of online media, only having posted light-hearted things and funny stuff that he wants others to see. So the Ashbot only works best in light-hearted situations. But when it comes to real interactions and more heavier moments like when Martha is upset, he's got a lot less to work with. But he did find out recently that Martha likes sex, so he puts two and two together and tries suggesting that. And Martha knows he can't actually pick up on the subtext of what she's saying or read her expressions and know what she wants to hear. It's not human enough. and it's starting to really get under her skin. She's starting to realize what she's done and asks him to go downstairs, and he immediately obeys.
No, that's... Ash would argue over that. He wouldn't just leave the room because I'd ordered him to.
Okay.
No, fucking hell.
She tells him that he's not enough of him, that he's nothing. It's so clear that her mind is fracturing from this. Now that the mirage has broken and her brain has taken off the sugary glaze of having the grief taken away, she's just left with a mess. The grief keeps leaking out every time the Ashbot doesn't act naturally and reminds her that he's not actually there. And on top of that, she has the guilt of having brought this situation on herself in the first place. He's just real enough to feel bad about it all, and that makes it even worse. The next morning, after having kicked him out for some space, she sees him standing outside, doing nothing. Turns out the Ashbot can't go further than 25 meters away from its administrator. She doesn't like being called that, and he makes a quick joke about it. And that small fragment of human-like behavior is enough for her to bring him back inside when he asks. Once inside, he roams around a bit and finds that photo of the real Ash as a kid, and describes it as funny. We know from the opening of the episode that Ash didn't actually find it funny, as it was taken on a rather bad day. But because Ashbot is only made up of his online responses and Ash posted about it ironically, the Ashbot figured that Ash actually did find it funny. It's a small but effective scene that reinforces just how wrong this whole concept is. We don't post everything authentically, and we often glitter up the posts we do make so that they're more appealing to the public. So in reality, our online footprint isn't that accurate at all. And that moment where he called the photo funny was where Martha fully realized that he will never be Ash. He'll never be able to fill that hole that the real Ash left. But now she was stuck with this husk of him and had to do something about it. So they walk up to the Lover's Leap together, and she points out that this wouldn't have happened with the real him, but if it did, he would have worked it out and tried to stop it. The Ashbot doesn't quite get it still, so she tells him to jump. He responds saying he never expressed suicidal thoughts, so he doesn't get why he would. Martha points out what she should have accepted when Ashbot was still just an email or on the phone.
You're just a few ripples of you. There's no history to you. You're just a performance of stuff that he performed without thinking, and it's not enough.
Then she insists that he jumps, and he says plainly, "Okay, if you're absolutely sure." And she makes a fatal mistake. She remarks that Ash would have been scared, that he wouldn't have jumped off without pleading for his life, without crying. And the Ashbot takes this in. The robot immediately responds in the way Martha told him that Ash would have responded.
No, I'm frightened. Darling, please, don't mean. I don't want to die. Oh God, I don't want to die.
It's not fair.
Please, I'm frightened. I don't want to die. Don't.
She had given it that one bit of humanity that she shouldn't have. Now it would plead for its life. Now she was in a position where she would have to kill Ash to be able to finally grieve Ash. Even if it wasn't him and she knew that, there was also a part of her that didn't. Not out of logic or reasoning, but out of love for the real Ash. Out of emotion. Human emotion. Every time she would try to get rid of him from this point on, he would act as real as any of us would. And it would be too convincing for her to go through with it without, at that moment, feeling like she was killing him herself. She was now stuck in an eternal loop of grief and guilt, never being able to move on. This is shown to us in the last scene where she is with her daughter, who is at least 7 years old at this point. Like the old photos of Ash's brother Jack or his father that his mother kept in the attic, Martha now keeps the Ashbot in the attic. A hyper-realistic ghost of a lost loved one that she can't get rid of, one her daughter gets to see every weekend and on her birthdays. There isn't another man in the picture, and with the situation they're in, it's most likely that there never will be. She will be forever stuck with the shadow of the man she once loved, never being able to move on. So, there you have it. Be Right Back, written by Charlie Brooker and directed by Owen Harris. It's quite a chilling episode of Black Mirror because, unlike other episodes, it doesn't quite end. It's another great example of how technology continues to change faster than people ever will. People are imperfect, and that's what makes us people. Ash and Martha's relationship was good because it wasn't perfect, because there were disagreements, because Ash was on his phone all the time, imperfections that they couldn't fix, and things that made the good times even sweeter when they came around. There's a fair few Black Mirror episodes that end on a bad note, but it's quite difficult to capture what this ending feels like. But I think the pain that's written all over Martha's face in the final scene is enough to speak for itself. Hayley Atwell is a fantastic actor, and I think she and Domhnall Gleeson did a great job with their characters. Subscribe if you enjoyed this analysis, and thanks again to Huz for suggesting I do a Black Mirror episode. If you liked it and you want to see another episode in particular or something else you think I'd be interested in talking about, let me know in the comments and I will do so when I can. Until then, see you later.